Welcome back to The Developing Doctor, the podcast where we bring the heart and soul back to healthcare and where growth never stops, no matter what stage of career you're in. I'm Dr. Ben Reinking, pediatric cardiologist, physician coach, and your host today. My guest today is someone who I'm really excited to talk to, and she's had experiences that have changed how she practiced. Dr. Marina Sokolina is the dental sleep medicine specialist and the founder of Harmony Dental Arts in New York City. She holds a dental degree from NYU College of Dentistry and is a diplomat of the American Board of Dental Sleep Medicine. Her work has been featured in Forbes, AARP, and the Journal of Dental Sleep Medicine, and she served on the board of American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine. She's also the author of an upcoming book, which we're going to talk about, Breathless, a narrative journey through real patient stories behind sleep-disordered breathing, written for clinicians who want to understand what we're missing. Dr. Sokolina, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so honored to be here.
Well, I want to start just with your story. You have an interesting path to practicing dentistry in New York City. And tell us about where you were trained and how you wound up sitting in the chair that you're in.
Based on my accent, a lot of people can guess. I'm originally from St. Petersburg, Russia, and that's the place where I got my dental education in medical school. I always like to accentuate that moment because it's a very different concept of becoming a doctor or dentist comparing to dental school in United States. That was my second dental school. I graduated from NYU College of Dentistry. And then I did my general residency program where I trying to find my pathway. I find, that period of life, and I know you help a lot of people. I was in the same shoes and I find it nerve wracking. I found it so frustrating. I thought I had a firm belief what I'm the only one. It probably we can explain that because it was my fourth year in United States. Now I understand what I had no clues how a system works because it really takes years to learn. You can read books, you can try to get it through, now through social media, but having mentor, probably that's the best way to understand the system. So after I did my general practice residency, and I was so frustrated. What am I gonna do? If anybody gonna hire me? I had that question. And at the same time, I felt very knowledgeable. I felt so passionate towards field. I felt like I have such a huge wings behind me, just I didn't know how to fly. I had no map where to fly, who to fly with. So that was very frustrating period. And I knew I want to have a private practice. I knew that part. I really want to operate my own business, but how to make it happen when I had, no clue about systems, not insurance system, not patient communication system, hiring system. No? So I start working. I worked for 2 years. During that time, it was not such a super environment. It was a very, I would say, limited environment. But even in a limited environment, if you're creative, you can do a lot of things. So I learned pediatric, actually, dentistry. I help a lot of underserved population kids, and the amount of decay or approach to early development. I want to put it in the most ethical way, how to raise kids in that special neighborhood where I practice really opened my eyes. So that was super valuable experience with first 2 years of practicing. And I did a little bit of other specialties. As a general dentist, we know how to do we should know how to do root canals, how to do periodontal care. So in that practice, I was not one person do it all. It was a multi-specialty practice, but I was able to learn or practice some other things. And then, for me, I always want to have a family. So in Russia, we have a different standards when you have to start having a family. And according to those standards, I was already like old maid 5 times. So
Yes,
I
the
was so
expectations. Yes.
yes, like my mom told me, you really have to start, thinking about things seriously in the early age. But then I have to finish first medical school, then I have to finish dental school. And then I thought I'm never going to be able to have kids. But when I, got pregnant and I was 30, I thought I'm the oldest one. But I was so shocked when I learned I'm the youngest person giving birth on my floor in San Barnabas Hospital in New Jersey. So that was shock. But that being said, when I gave birth to my oldest son, I realized what I have to really get on my own. And when he was 2 months old, I got the ad in New York Times. That was that time. What I got the ad in New York Times. I put the ad in New York Times, and I got one call from the dentist who said he wants to sell his practice not too far from place where I live in Clifton, New Jersey. So, he was the only one. So, of course, I respond and I purchased his practice. And that was my practice in New Jersey. And then, many years later, I started building practice in New York City. But because in my own practice, that was already my own. It was my patient. So if anything fail, we are married. Oh, what they gonna do with me? So I had a lot of anxiety that way. So I started taking a lot of advanced courses on full mouth rehabilitation, cosmetic dentistry, and I want to create the system, but not gonna fail. We have a very different stories because you are medical doctors. You have a different mindset, which I learned later on when I started practicing sleep medicine. But it doesn't have to be perfect. But for dentists, they raise us. It has to be perfect. Filling have to be perfect, otherwise patient get decay. Crown have to be perfect, otherwise it's gonna fail. So that mindset really drove me crazy. And I didn't want anything to fail. So I got into full mouth rehabilitation. Patient keep breaking things what I did for them because they have strong forces. Then I start doing orthodontic, and it's also change from the ideal arrangement what I plan to have. And then through that course, one of my friends actually said, if you want to make your vision come true, you have to learn sleep. Because people do a lot of crazy things while they sleep. We consider it most relaxing part of the day when we like laying, not moving, but it's not true. Body, tons of process. What happened during the night? And it was 15 years ago when I started getting into dental sleep and helping people sleep and breathe in the same time. I don't want to make it, my solo because I want us to have engaging conversation, but brush strokes, that's my story. And I would be very happy to elaborate on a parts what you think would be interesting for your audience.
Yeah, I'd love to go back to something that you said, which I think is common for many people who come out of professional school, right? Dentists, physicians, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, we leave with this really great clinical knowledge and have confidence in our clinical ability. And then, we enter practice and realize the job is so much different than it was during training, right? So there's this complex system that we have to work in and figure out how to navigate. So many physicians in particular enter employment agreements where they're employed physicians, they don't own their own practice, which is a little bit different than dentistry, although my understanding is dentistry has shifted to less private practices, more corporatization. So tell me what you learned, working as an employed physician initially to starting your own practice. Like what was that jump like? What did you learn and through that process that other people could learn from?
As I mentioned, I find it really challenging for me first find the job what I like. That might be a little bit different for medical professionals because if you like the hospital, you start working there, you follow the rules. At least aesthetically, hospital have to follow certain standards.
Yes, absolutely. Mhm.
In dentistry, dental office, or at least many dental offices, what I was offered the employment, the aesthetic standard was not there. But yes, so it did not look how I think my office where I practice should look. It's a very important factor because for me, you get impression first. So I didn't want to represent it, but I didn't have a choice. The offices where I want to work, they did not find me, and it might be a legitimate reason about somebody who just came to the country, who has a heavy accent, who doesn't have points to connect with the owner. And those points are funny, like school years, like college years. I didn't graduate from college in the United States. So I'm trying to connect and
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so true that people, especially internationally trained physicians and dentists and providers, come with this huge depth of experience from their training abroad, wherever that is, and then they come to the U.S. and frequently have to repeat their training. But because the training systems, before the training was repeated, were so different, is sometimes credit isn't given for those years. So did you find a way to overcome that barrier, or do you have any tips or tricks for people who might be going through the same process? Like how did you wind up getting the practice of your dreams?
Practice of my dream happened to be practice of my own. I own the practice, but I personally have advice. Like, it doesn't have to be. I'm sure a lot of people who listen to your podcast, they might not able to own the practice, or they don't have it in a dream list they have. Not everybody want to own the practice, but they want to help people. So to find a job, I didn't do it, and I think that was my mistake. I didn't do enough networking. It was a really new concept to me in general, because I would compare networking with, we can have a stone and we can have a pebble. From stone to become pebble, you have to network. Networking will gonna smooth out your sharp edges, and then you're going to become not stranger as a danger, because whatever's unknown, and for me, I know I was totally unknown to the people I came on the interview. I tried to talk about dental school years and residency years and clinical cases, but a lot of time people want to connect on sport, on some food experience but not so far above the ground. They're right on the ground, and that's how friendship form and relationship form. Right now, I have experience working with the patients. Patients come to my practice, and I try to I try to learn what they like, and be not familiar, be conversational on the topics they like, because that's how we form patient doctor relationship. So for people who just like me came from different background, recommendation is to professionally network. There are a lot of associations. They have to start early, and I recommend to start during the training. Medical knowledge, very important. That's what I did. I learned through the book, but learn through people. That's point number one. Point number two, which I also did not succeed. I always dream of finding that mentor, somebody like you who gonna train. Maybe because I didn't network, I didn't come up with that solution. I think finding the mentor, and it doesn't have to be one mentor. It can be mentors on the area where trying to succeed. You really have to put that goal and work towards that goal. Having a mentor, very important. A lot of interpersonal moments you can learn and get shaped from stone to pebble. So that would be my two recommendation: mentorship, networking, and continuing education courses to start them early on, because that's where you're going to network, and that's where you're going to find your mentor, and not to be afraid to reach out, and rejections is a way to the goal.
Great advice. It's not always what you know, but also who you know, and that is a factor that I think influences everyone's careers at some point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. And, you're helping people to reach that goal.
So I want to pivot a little bit to your clinical work because it overlaps actually the pediatric cardiology a little bit. And I talk about snoring and sleep with a lot of my patients because it stresses the heart. And as you said, people do crazy things in their sleep. So can you just walk us through what's happening and why it's so important that people think about their sleep and talk about sleep with their healthcare provider?
This is, you in such a wonderful area, which in my professional career, I always want to be connected. Pediatric cardiology. Just before our conversation today, I had a consultation with a patient who was very surprised what babies, kids can have sleep apnea. So I want to get to my book a little bit. I know we plan to talk about that. What in my book, which is a story, medical mystery. It's a story of the family, husband, wife, and a child, love story, parenting story. So, pediatric cardiology, the child. A lot of times, kids express tiredness very differently. I want to start with that. Instead of being just like us adults who tired and want to fall asleep, kids become hyperactive. And that hyperactivity in a collective environment like school or daycare become disruptive. And child I don't want to use that heavy verbiage, get a label. But of course, if you're a teacher and you have a child who constantly disrupt the rules, you're gonna act through the family. You're gonna let family know. You're gonna let social worker know what things doesn't go in a scenario I expected to go. And that advice get to the parent, and parents start acting up different ways. And the way what it's very common, and I see it a lot in my practice, called ADHD evaluation. I reflected in a book, and medications. And wonder why we have later in life a lot of problems with drugs. So that being said, we're talking about sleep very often. This child is just simply tired from disrupted sleep. And that disrupted sleep can very easily happen from a lot of tissues in this area called tonsils and adenoids. And as a modern people and modern kids, we have a lot of irritation factors what make tonsils and adenoids grow, and we not developed in a way we're supposed to develop due to soft food eating, lack of the breastfeeding, allergies, mouth breathing, or it leads us all to the mouth breathing. But mouth breathing at night cannot provide you restful sleep, because from time to time tongue gonna get into the airway where tonsils and adenoids swollen already reside, and the breathing gonna stop, and child will wake up and fall back to sleep. And that can happen, for the child it should happen less than one time in an hour. Even if it happened once in an hour, this child will express hyperactivity or disruptive behavior, and including repeated bedwetting. But all these stories about ADHD symptomatologists, symptoms of ADHD, and there are a lot of them. I reflect some of them in the book, Behavioral of the Child, who is hero of my book, not very often lead to evaluation of sleep. Very often it lead other ways, what I mentioned before. And a lot of those kids might have heart troubles as well, because if that breathing disrupt, heart will suffer. It can suffer from oxygen deprivation, or maybe some rhythm disturbances. I don't want to go deep into your area because that's a pediatric cardiology area, but I do see kids on that type of spectrum, I would say, who are suffering, and a lot of adults don't have a clue what sleep might be a key reason. It's never one reason in the human body, but sleep plays such a significant role.
Yeah, sleep is such an important part of wellness, really, and well-being overall. So, you mentioned your book, Breathless, correct? Tell me what motivated you to write it, and you kind of mentioned that there's a child who I think is a core character in the book, or a core story in the book. Tell us a little bit more about the book, and what you hope people walk away from the book after they've read it.
I'm going to tell you my wishes. So, what made me write the book? I would say my patients inspire me to write the book. I see, sleep patients all the time. And I admire people when they're trying to follow the treatment recommendations. And for sleep treatment recommendations, very often is a CPAP machine. And it's a difficult treatment to endure. And there are a lot of other treatments for sleep apnea, what not in a general field. I would say, sleep apnea, CPAP, and you do what you can do. So I wrote some articles for Forbes to help people to learn some tips and tricks. I have a lot of sleep physicians who I work with. I interview them to try to make this treatment easier, and also to show what there are some other options. So number one goal of writing this book was to help my adult patients to find the treatment they can endure, because sleep apnea is a lifelong disease. I want them to find something what fit at this point of time, because maybe in 5 years it change. Maybe they gain weight, they lose weight. So I want to put all possible treatment what exists right now. Then second thing, just like I mentioned, I'm very passionate about future generations. Future generations, let's put multiple way. So I want to show parents what child behavior doesn't always mean easy way, medications. I want to show them what there are way to address that also. I want to bring, I want to introduce them what sleep apnea exists for kids as well. and how the treatment happened. And in a way, I did my book. I want people emotionally connect with the hero. I want them to recognize themselves in the heroes. Yes, my heroes are, young family. They also immigrant just like me, and I'm in the book as well. Helping them to navigate, or they help me to learn. And it's not, treatment is never treatment. It's always connected with emotions, with routine, with we're going through the day. There are so many factors, and I want people to understand, and I want medical providers to understand other part of the medal. Like I want to show what happened at home when somebody get the treatment. Maybe they can, in a presentation, introduce the treatment little bit better. So I want my readers emotionally connect with the story, recognize themselves or the loved one and learn what they can do. And I try to touch all modern components of life: nutrition, intimacy, weight, education for the child, all the things what we actually concern in life and what relationship are dynamic. And I didn't want to make it dark story. I hope my readers gonna connect with the heroes and they learn something on that journey. So that's my wish for my book. And it's gonna be, I don't know, it's gonna become public maybe today, published live today on Amazon. It's called Breathless. And my name is Maria Sokolina. So probably by the time you're gonna put this podcast in live, my book will be already on Amazon, and I will provide you some information what you can put underneath the podcast.
Perfect. Well, it sounds like, it'll be a great resource for patients and providers, but also I just love that it's story based. So even if someone doesn't have an experience with sleep apnea or if someone isn't a healthcare provider, I think there may be just a nice story in this book that people can read and walk away from and learn a few things in the process.
That's what my wish too. Like I'm sure you in your practice explain to parents what's a sleep study for the child. And I put that sleep study for the child inside the book and how I think parents can make it better. They can make it like a spaceship experience, let's call it, And when they want to bring some therapy at home, how to make it in the shape of game, the family interaction. And of course, in the family interaction, it's going to be one parent who's for it and one parent resist it. And another thing, what I want to, at least that's what I see a lot in my practice. As I mentioned before, I grew up in Russia, and my first experience with McDonald's was the time when actually McDonald's came to Russia. It was still, I think it was still Soviet Union. It was on that border, so McDonald's came. And I was on my second year of medical school, and I gathered my other three friends, and we went. And it was a line. I always show these slides in my lecture. It was a line, like you have to stand in line to McDonald's 3 hours. But for me, it was like that McDonald's, like that. Yes. So we got in, money were limited. We were students. So we got, meals for all of us to try. And we cut them in four. And that was my last time with McDonald's.
First and last time with McDonald's. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it was great, and I really liked the cover, and I really like everything about that. But it was not so available when I was growing up. But when I moved to the States, I was already not so. I did not grow up with that. But what I find for a lot of my patients, food is not the nutrition. Food is memory. Food is something to evoke those warmest moments in life. And of course, food industry giants know about that. They know how to create that euphoric point with food. And unfortunately, that food might not be so agreeable with the body who trying to consume the food. So for the people who, when on my early stages of my dental sleep medicine practice, I look at the weight, GLP-1 was not in the picture yet. So we talk about nutrition, we talk, briefly, I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not definitely nutrition, but, I would say, the food, it affect the weight, affect success of the treatment I'm going to provide. And it was so wrong. Because at that time, I didn't have a clue what the food is all about. Food is all about psychology. It's psychology. It's such a deeply layered point. What, of course, with that conversation, I can only upset people. So I learned that. That's why that's important part of my book. I try to bring it up how difficult it is for family members who trying to fight. And we're not talking about addiction. We're talking about regular people who cannot force themselves to eat fruits and vegetables. And I meet them in my practice all the time.
Yeah. It's so true that there are thoughts and feelings that are tied to so many of our actions, and eating seems like just something that we do, but there's also, like you said, memory and emotions and culture attached to the things that we eat, and it's difficult to change that.
Yeah, yeah, it is so deep. And another thing about my book, in the back of my book, I didn't want to sound like storyteller. I put the articles and books I use for reference, or the books what really leave a deep mark inside of me. I find them very influential. So I put them as a reference in the end of my book, what people can see. I'm not just getting information from my head or based on a practice or anecdotal moments. I got serious research and all of that. I just put them in the shape of story, not to be like a rhetorical, like, but to have to make what people can have fun learning on the way.
Yes, it's so important. There's so much misinformation and just availability to information. So I like that you cited your references and provided resources so that people can understand where the information is coming from.
I'm a serious person. I'm a serious scientist. It's just I don't want people to be bored.
Story is a great way for us to remember things, right? And so it's a great way for us to educate people and share what we know by putting it in a format that is accessible and memorable. So what a great approach.
No, I 100%. I don't know how it was for your education, but for my education in Russia, we learn myths of ancient Greece. And recently I was actually in Greece trying to connect that. So what I learned from myths of ancient Greek, it was a powerful message to society how to live at that time. And then later on, we got Bible, we got, Old Testimony, we got New Testimony. It was just the way to encourage us to live in a certain way. And I find that thought so great. And that's why I think when we have a powerful message, it would be the best to put it in a shape of story. It's been proven for the last 6,000 years.
So well said. One of the things that I'm noticing as you're talking about this, and one of the central messages of my podcast is how can we bring the heart back to healthcare, and how can healthcare providers just find joy in the practice of medicine or dentistry again. And so what did you get out of writing this book that you think other providers or people who are thinking, gosh, I don't know if I can write a book, or I'm so busy in my practice and I've got all this going on that I don't have time to invest into something like that. What did you get out of writing the book that other people can learn from?
No, of course. I'm sure anybody who wrote the book would say, I had a dream of writing the book since I was that big. I don't know if I had a dream of writing the book, but I remember myself telling myself stories when I was very little and I was embarrassed what maybe. My mom really wanted to be like, I don't want other people to think anything about you, like anything bad. So I try to keep my stories as my own secret. So I secretly tell myself the story. But then I had school, and I'm gonna go back to the joy of profession. I'm gonna tell it in a long way. So I was in school, and we had it in Russian school. You have to write a composition, and I don't know. I got that writer block. Now I can call it writer block, and I would ask my dad, like, "Can you help me to write a composition?" And parenting was different that time. Like right now, if any of my kids would ask me to write a composition, I would be so happy to write a composition for them.
Right.
But that time was a different idea, and which is wrong. Now I understand it's so wrong, but was different parenting. And my father said, "What as a normal father, no, you have to write, you have to figure it out. Like I'm not gonna be adult for you. Like you have to do it on your own." So I had such a terrible taste how I can compose the story. Like I didn't understand what they want from me. So forward. I still love the stories. I still love to recite like movies, what I watched to tell the people who didn't watch the movie and spoil the whole pleasure of them not knowing what happened. So stories, and I start writing them. I started writing the stories, and actually, she later on became a hero of this book. My dental assistant who said, my book starts with this very strong scene of my dental assistant saving her husband from ventricular fibrillation. As a cardiologist, you know what it is, and chance of survival outside of clinical setting only 3%. So that specific person who had a, we can say, Russian language major education from university in Russia said to me, stories. I don't like short stories. I can't connect to the heroes in the short stories. It's not enough time. I guess it has to be the book. If I have to share, it has to be the book. But in the same time, for physicians, at least in the Russian literature, we have a lot of physicians who become writers. We have such a vast majority of the material what come to us for our service. But we have to remember what behind those symptoms of high blood pressure, acid reflux, ventricular atrial fibrillation, it's a human being with emotions and interest. And if you take this into consideration, two things gonna happen. You're gonna help your patient better because not one size fits all. And in the same time, you're going to learn a lot of things yourself and it's going to save you from burnout because it's not repeatable treatment. You come to me, you have a cold, this is your antibiotic because it's a different, you can shape the treatment in a different way and you can feel creative every day. Every day, feel what you accomplish something different. You learn something for yourself. So I find this as a number one pill from burnout. And number two, which I don't find such a culture in United States, and I'll get back to writing my book. What it's very important, we practice medicine. We have a highly stressful job. We have to plan pleasure. You have to really plant your pleasure. You can say it in the course of the week. You can say in the course of the day. You can say in the course of the year because it's going to be different type of pleasures what you want to implant into your life. And very often I find, physicians, when I talk to them and they say, I don't have time to plan my vacation. I really want to do staycation, but staycation become very often stresscation. It can be that way too, because even Asclepius, we're talking about ancient Greece, he believed what pilgrimage or changing the environment have a healing purposes. So going back to writing my book, so it cannot be the story. It has to be many stories, 26 actually. I have 26 chapters, and each chapter can be like a separate story, but they connected through the heroes. I have to interview people. I actually have a real providers, a real heroes inside my book and learn about their specialty. I also have, I have a friend cardiologist who, with whom I learn about how sudden cardiac death have a direct correlation with sleep apnea. I have integrative cardiologist and I learn a lot of things about longevity from her. So I have my podcast. I interview a lot of people who later on become a hero of my book. I learn from them. So writing the book increase my level of knowledge. The first thing, I didn't write my book alone. I took the course. I'm going to do a little promotion for the course. I'm really thankful. It's called Manuscript. So they helped me to not to write the book for me. That's not a ghostwriter. So I wrote my book myself. But it was editorial help, and I had 4 editors. I had a positional editor, somebody who helped me with a general idea. Then I had a developmental editor who we went chapter by chapter, and then I have a revision editor who helped me to polish, and then I have a, we can call it layout editor who helped to make it. And I had also, help with the cover. So I had help on a way, but in the same time, I had a cohort of other people who wrote their books. So we can learn from each other a little bit. And then this whole process, like they really, I swim with them. So they really hold my hand through the process.
Two things that I took from that as you were talking is one, as healthcare providers, we are so fortunate to be able to walk along with our patients because really what we're doing is living their stories with them, right? And although they are the heroes of the story, we get to be their guides through their life, and what a privilege that is. And there's joy in that process if we are able to see it. And the second thing I took from that goes back to what you said earlier, which is kind of we all get by with a little help from our friends to summarize. And I like that you wrote your book through this course and with others and with the support of others. And it really echoes some of the lessons that you shared earlier.
Yeah, yeah, that's very important. And I think, yes, it's true. A lot of physicians get burned out with the amount of hours, with the amount of human interaction. But I can say it. It doesn't mean I leave it all the time. Like yesterday, I had a very difficult day, and I say retrograde Mercury really was around me, like nothing I did right. So, but we all have days like that. But in the same time, if you were able to carve the time just for yourself and look at the bigger picture and look at this, bad day yesterday with the eyes what you're gonna have in a year from now. How important, like yesterday, my suction broke. Of course, it's gonna break again, and I lost my AirPod. Like it was everything was terrible, but in a year, it's gonna make totally no sense. Like doesn't matter. Like why would I even stress about that? And I think that constant interaction with people they call patience. We have to have a lot of patience for them. And sometimes it's hard if you are exhausted. I get it. That's true. But, I would say carving the time for yourself, doing something what can make your body, move your body and have a little pleasure, have a little fun. And of course, I think most important thing, and it's going back to beginning of our conversation, social circle. You have to invest time in a social circle. True, it might be a little bit more difficult for physicians from a different countries because sometimes you might end up in a area where maybe no countrymen, nobody who knows what your school cafeteria lunch look like it would be harder to connect. But now we have social media and it's not a bad thing. Find your social circle, create your social circle, invest a lot of time in that. And I think that's the good, burnout recipe.
Well, as we're kind of wrapping up, you've shared so much with us as we're wrapping up. Where can people find you? What's a good place for them to find you on social media and on the internet?
So my social media, I would be so happy if any of your listeners find me through Facebook, LinkedIn. I also put the interviews on the YouTube and a short version of the reels on the YouTube and Instagram. It's a great story. I try to share not only my scientific life or book life. I try to share the social elements. I'm crazy about books. I part of the book club. So I share, reviews or meeting with the authors of a certain books and, the life of what some people might find my recommendation useful in the area of books or maybe in the area of, some art adventure or sport adventure. I'm not such a great sports, person, but I like to try different sports. So social media is a great way. And I would be so honored if some of your listeners write to me. I always respond. I respond. I really respond. I want to help colleagues. I find mentorship challenging. So if I can be mentor for somebody even a little bit, of course, I would be honored. So social media is the best way, or through the website drmariasokolina.com. And I'm gonna have a book on Amazon, and it's gonna also have my information. So if people want to express their opinion about the book or criticism, oh, it's all welcome.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. This is exactly why this podcast exists because stories matter. And I'm so thankful that you shared your story and also that we could talk about your book, Breathless, which is coming up here in the near future. So people can find it on Amazon, like you said, hopefully by the end of the day today, and it should be live when this podcast is out. But for our listeners, just to repeat, follow Dr. Sokolina on Instagram at Dr. Maria Sokolina. You can visit her at drmariasokolina.com and look for her upcoming book, Breathless, on Amazon and other places where you can find books. And if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, subscribe to The Developing Doctor, please. Now's the time. We're here to help you grow as a physician, as a healthcare provider, and as a human being. Until next time, keep using your heart more, not less, and we'll see you in the next episode.